Today on Straight Talk Africa, a frank conversation with the Pan-African industrialist Rujugiro Ayabatwa. He overcame humble beginnings and huge obstacles on his way to becoming one of the continent's most successful business tycoons. At 73, the retired but not tired Mr. Rujugiro Ayabatwa is not done yet, helping and inspiring young Africans to build a better world. That's coming up next, right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa. It's Wednesday, November 20th. I am Shaka Sali.
Well, hello to you, Shaka, and hello to all our viewers and listeners on the continent and elsewhere. I'm Mariama Diallo, your social media reporter.
Today, we'll introduce to you a Pan-African industrialist and philanthropist, Rujugiro Ayabatwa. We'll also talk about his roots as a Rwandese refugee in Burundi to becoming one of Africa's most influential personalities.
And coming up later in our SCA inbox, you, our audience, have responded to our topic through your emails and Facebook comments. We'll reveal some of them ahead on Straight Talk Africa.
But first, Rwandan-born Rujugiro Ayabatwa has consistently overcome great adversities to become one of the continent's leading industrialists and philanthropists. His personal wealth is estimated in millions of US dollars. His companies produce products such as cigarettes, tea, plastic shoes, beer, snack foods, and cement. They operate in 10 countries and trade in 27 nations across Africa and the Middle East. My colleague Paul Diho has more on the story.
I don't think about myself as a Rwandese, I think myself as African. I wish when I die that whatever I started can continue, not for expanding business, but building up something. And this is what I keep telling my kids. This is the legacy I will leave with them, to continue the work I started of building up something in Africa.
At age 73, Rujugiro Ayabatwa is one of Rwanda's most prominent business tycoons and a key player on the African continent. From an early age, Rujugiro knew he wanted to be a businessman and a philanthropist. And his sons are learning their business skills from their father.
My dad, for example, like in business, on the business side, is, I would say, difficult, very demanding, but also fair.
Even when I started in the business, it wasn't directly being appointed here or there. You started from the bottom.
Rujugiro has always turned adversity into triumph. After the death of his mother, he obtained a certificate as a clerk and a typist and went into exile as a Rwandan refugee in Burundi. Soon, he found a job as a clerk. After work, he spent most evenings learning French. Later became so proficient with French that he began teaching the language to other Rwandan exiles.
It's not really an individualistic, whether you talk about business or community development, nation building. He wants to involve more people. He is involved in cement making. Tribia is in tobacco, growing as well as cigarette making. He's in growing and processing tea in Rwanda. His contribution to Africa is very significant.
Over the years, he has expanded his business holdings across much of the subcontinent, where his work is seen as a model for delivering development and jobs to rural Africa. Today, Mr. Rujugiro's brands are sold in more than 27 African countries.
My ambition was not to die as an employee. I was not interested by making money in Rwanda. I was interested by seeing the country development. We've brought electricity to a church in rural Rwanda, and they built a school and a daycare center in Kigali. We built roads and a bridge in Uganda. and we are helping widows find work and feed their families in South Sudan. We had a big problem of about 1 million people coming back and not having house. So I told them, I said, please give me land. I'm going to build a house for some families. So they gave me the land. I built about 100 houses and sold it at a cost price.
Like many industrialists, Tribat's success was built on his canny ability to spot opportunities and take risks. He also credits the help of many people along the way who recognized his drive and determination.
My primary goal was to build up something. I'm happy with what I've done. Because some people count success in terms of money, in terms of this. For me, is achieving what you set as a goal.
Mr. Rujugiro does have his critics. The Rwandan government recently confiscated some of his property, including a shopping mall. They say the property was abandoned, a claim he disputes. The government alleges that Mr. Rujugiro, who resides in South Africa, abandoned the mall because he no longer lives in Rwanda, as a justification for seizing his property. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
Thanks, Paul, for that interesting report. Now, joining us here in our Washington studios are two distinguished guests. The man himself, Rujugiro Ayabatwa, an African businessman and philanthropist. Mr. Ayabatwa also served on Rwandan head of state Paul Kagame's Presidential Advisory Council in 2009, where he served along with 12 other members, including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. I have to say, Mr. Rujugiro Ayabatwa, that I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host you for the first time on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Shaka. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm glad you give me this opportunity to tell my story.
Thank you very much for being so kind to come all the way to Washington to share your interesting story with the continent and beyond.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. And of course, a man I first met back in 1986, right here in Washington, D.C., Dr. David Himbara, expert analyst on development issues in Africa, working as a strategist for various institutions, including the African Development Bank, the University of the Witwatersrand, Development Bank of Southern Africa, and for private sector firms and government departments on the continent. Among other things, he has also served as private secretary and strategic advisor to Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Well, what can I say, Professor Dr. Himbara, really? It's only a pleasure having you back on Straight Talk Africa.
As always, Shaka, it's a pleasure to be here and share some interesting moments with you.
Well, I have to say the feeling is mutual.
Thank you.
Later in the program, we'll give you, the audience, a chance to call and talk with our guests. The number to call is 202-619-3111. The US country code is 1. Let me come to you immediately, Mr. Rujugiro Ayabatwa. Why are you popularly, by the way, referred to as Rujugiro?
Because this was my name, which I had been called all my young age. But later on, they added my father name, which is Ayabatwa, and the Christian name. But the name comes from my great father.
What exactly does it mean, Rujugiro? What is Rujugiro?
I really can't tell. I can't tell the meaning, but what I can tell is the story. Rujugiro was one of the king of Rwanda in around 17th century, and he used to be my great-grandfather.
I am talking to a prince right here.
Not
from Nyanza.
Not really. Not really, because the line of prince goes up to 4 generations. After the 4th generation, you are no longer prince.
But guess what? You have since become, in fact, another type of prince. Yeah, as far as the world of business is concerned, you have a right to be a prince.
That is not my right to say so.
I see.
Other
I see.
people can say so, but myself, I can't say so.
What about Ayabatwa?
Ayabatwa is a name of my father.
But how come it
It's
seems
like-
to have connections with an ethnic community called Abatwa?
That one has got a meaning. It means a joke.
Really?
Yes, it's like if when my dad was born, and they told his father that he had a son, maybe he said that is a joke.
Very interesting.
So the name came from there.
Walk us back to your beginnings, Rujugiro Ayabatwa. You were a very young man. You were 19. You experienced some problems. You moved to neighboring Burundi, and you start working with the post office and what have you. Who would you say, if you had to talk to us from the deepest, better part of the bottom of your Nyanza heart and soul, who would you say was that person that was kind enough to lend you his or her shoulders so that you could see this far?
I would say I had an uncle who always was teaching me certain things, telling me the right way to go, and he put in my head ambition, but ambition with humanity, and not ambition to acquire wealth only, but the ambition to acquire wealth to help others.
Did that uncle live long enough in order to be able to see some of what you have been able to accomplish?
Unfortunately, he was killed in the genocide of 1994, but before that, he was living comfortably, and he was very happy to see what he had achieved until then.
And what have you done so far, at least in his name? I know that you have a foundation.
Yes, what I try to do is to help young people to continue their study when they can't afford it, or introduce them in life, like taking them in my business as a trainee, and sometime if there is an opportunity, give them a job, and those who wants to go into business, I also help by lending them money, by showing them the way they can do. So I really try to promote and help young people to enter in life.
What is the reaction so far from some of the people that you have reached out to?
It's difficult because when you do those kind of things, you don't expect people to come back and report to you or tell you unless you meet them in a certain occasion, and then they are proud to be where they are, and they thank you about what you help. And some of them write to me, others come to me and send a message, and I'm happy with it.
Is there any particular individual that can actually stand out? Someone you can point your finger to and say, you know what? This is a guy that I helped, you know?
No, I will not do that. And you know why? Because if you help someone and then you go out advertise for it, then that help become nil.
A very humble man. Before we pause for a short break, we would like to remind you that Straight Talk Africa is on the social networking website Facebook. Just enter the keyword Straight Talk Africa, become a fan, and connect with other friends of the Voice of America. We'll be right back with you, so please don't go away.
Rujugiro Ayabatwa is born in Rwanda in 1940. In 1960, Ayabatwa moves to Burundi and secures his first job in the regional post office of Rwanda, Burundi in Bujumbura. In 1961, he establishes École Libre in Burundi to educate Rwandan refugees. In 1964, he marries his wife Natalia in Burundi. In 1973, he becomes a leading importer of salt, wheat flour, and cigarettes. He earns the moniker the King of Salt. In 1978, Ayabatwa establishes the Burundi Tobacco Company. In 1990, he moves from Burundi to South Africa. In 1996, he finances a housing development to alleviate the housing crisis in Rwanda.
This is the Voice of America broadcasting worldwide. President Kennedy is dead.
50 years after Kennedy's death, his legacy continues to be a source of inspiration.
He inspired people to be part of something that was larger than they were.
He stood for freedom at a very tough time.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
Each of us could make a difference.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. What is your opinion about today's topic? Call us at 202-619-3111. U.S. country code 1. When you call, remember the following. Ask only one question, keep your comment brief, and turn down the volume on your radio or television. Now let's return to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Githui. And of course, this is Straight Talk Africa, coming to you live from Washington. Let me come to you again, Mr. Rujugiro Ayabatwa. I don't very much refer to your first name because I happen to have some problems pronouncing it. I wouldn't want to end up, being the guy that murdered the name. Is that okay?
It's not difficult. Maybe you should learn French first.
I see. Yeah, I think what I was afraid of saying perhaps was that I happen to be illiterate in as far as French is concerned. Not that I never had an opportunity. In fact, I had not once, not twice, 3 times. But beyond saying, Weske vzare, avzare, areko, avzare, arevire, I can't say much.
But that's normal. That's normal. I think learning language depends on the situation you are in. Mm-hmm. If you are somewhere you have to speak that language, in a week or 2 weeks, and you speak it.
Sometimes they say adversity, in fact, could be the mother of a lot of things.
Yes,
now,
I agree.
Tell us, what is the secret behind your success, really? Very briefly.
Before maybe I tell you what I know about it, I will define the success. Mm-hmm. The success is not, as people put it, the amount of money you have in a pocket. Is be satisfied that you have achieved your goal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if we go by that point, then I agree with you that I am a success man. And the secret is not really something special, is normal. One, you have to have a vision. You have to know where you want to be. Second, you have to be prepared to pay the price of getting there. As they say, if you want something, you get it, depending on how badly you want it.
Really?
Yes. And secondly, behind this, there are certain value which you have to put in front. Mm-hmm. And the values such as honesty, the value such as putting human value in whatever you do, because if you don't really, if people don't trust you or don't accept to follow you, you achieve nothing, because being one man, you can't achieve a lot. So you need people to help you to achieve what you want to achieve. And those people will help you if you respect them, if you help them, if you understand them. So there are a certain number of values you have to attach to your vision in order to attain your goal.
Someone said of you that some of the things that he admires in you, and this happens to be your son-in-law, is that you are defined by being human, patient, and challenging.
Yes, I think that is very important. Human, that's one thing you can't ignore if you want to reach your goal and be satisfied at the end of the road that you have achieved your goal. And also, you have to be patient with people. All of us have got a strong point, weak point, and you have to accept. As you look for the strong point, you have to accept also that people have got a weak point, and be patient with them.
And one of your sons describes you as difficult, demanding, but fair.
I think that is normal. If you want to get a result out of something, you focus on the road you have to follow. And those people who are with you, you have to encourage them and push them to follow that road, no matter how difficult it is.
What is it that has helped you to accomplish all that? And yet, you come through as a very authentically simple, humble individual. How come all these successes did not enter what they would say your head or make you develop chips on your shoulders?
That is a difficult question, because there is how somebody is, and you keep to be who you are, and not changing because you have a power or you have money. And for me, maybe the major factor is that I consider money as a mean to reach what you have to do, but not a finality.
Not an end in itself.
Not an end in itself. And you, no matter how much money you have, if you are not using it correctly, if it's not helping other people, that it is not worth to have it.
Very interesting. You talk about the difficulties that you pass through. You are certainly not the only person that has gone through that route. There have been millions and millions of fellow Banyarwanda who lived in exile and what have you. They didn't come anywhere near here. Is it perhaps because you believe in what some say, it is only those who are willing to fail greatly that succeed enormously?
I totally agree with you. If you want a success, you have to accept the failure also. And when you fall down, you have to be strong to stand up.
To know how to,
Yes, to know how to stand up. And then say, I fall at step 4, now I stand up and go to step 6.
Very interesting. I have someone by the name Emmanuel Sebagabo, who sent in fact, an email from Dallas, Texas. He says, thank you very much for hosting one of our best and model businessmen of Africa. Mr. Rujugiro has created jobs across Africa more than anyone else of African descent, and still helping more people than some governments even. My question is, Mr. Rujugiro, what can you do to engage the African diaspora to get involved, learn the entrepreneurship techniques and the word of wisdom? That is one question. The other one is, when you have a time, can you please visit Dallas, Texas, so that you can meet us?
Okay, first let me thank Emmanuel for appreciating what I'm doing and also asking that question. I think it's not only helping others should not only come from business community or big business. It's something I would suggest any of us, anywhere he is, with his own means, do his best to help his next neighbor or whoever he can help. Because the world can be better if each of us help others.
I see. Well, I gather that there is a caller called Joseph from Atlanta, perhaps Georgia there, who would like to ask you a question. Good afternoon, Joseph. You are most welcome to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you, Dr. Shaka, and the rest of the panel. How are you all doing?
Hugely terrific, although I will disappoint you in this particular case because I happen to be a doctor but without a clinic, sir.
Yeah, Shaka, my name is Joseph Fobi. It is reassuring to have the likes of Tibet on the continent who do not fear risk, who have this spirit of philanthropism, and who also count their success not in terms of money. That said, I would say that African economic renaissance can only come when the private sector takes the lead. And you know, at the private sector, corruption is less tolerated. And the private sector can also easily create social wealth. In most of Africa, Shaka, you know more than I do, that government is the main employer. And that is why you see government officials flying first class, which is opposite of what we find in the developed world where the business executives and CEOs fly first class. So my question would be that how can we as Africans, or how can you make suggestions on how we can open the private sector? Because I believe that opening the private sector will set the agenda for development in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I think that is a very interesting question. Can you try to answer it?
Yes, thank you, Joseph, and good afternoon.
I think he's good.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not on the line.
Okay. No, your question is a bit because they have to be, and I totally agree with you that is only through private sector that Africa will develop. But you know the problem, maybe living here, I don't know what is happening in Africa. We live under government. And whatever is done there is done with a political objective and not economical objective. So to change this is we all African to stand up and tell those politicians enough is enough. Let's now do the right thing in the right way.
We'll talk about the political environment that can enable that type of enterprise in the second half. You are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. We'll have more of a discussion in a moment, but first, here is Mariama Diaro. Mariama, take it away, please.
Well, thanks, Shaka. Still to come, we'll reveal some of the fantastic feedback we've received from you, our audience, through social media. But now, here is our letter of the week from a Straight Talk Africa Facebook fan who responded to our question of the week. In our letter of the week, Deborah Chilufya from the Democratic Republic of Congo writes, "One needs to have the courage to try out new things. even if one knows that one might fail. Those who try and fail and try again without giving up achieve true success.
Like Voice of America on Facebook. Follow VOA on Twitter. Join VOA on our YouTube channel. Like, follow, join VOA.
This is Straight Talk Africa on the Voice of America. Call us now with your questions and comments. The number 202-619-3111. And the U.S. country code is 1. Call us collect and we'll pay for the call. Or call directs and we'll call you right back. Remember to keep your questions brief. Now back to Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Gidhui, and welcome back to Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. Once again, it's time to bring in my colleague and social media reporter, Mariama Diaro. Take it away, Mariama, again.
Well, hello, Shaka. And according to Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant and author, an entrepreneur is someone who searches for change, responds to it, and exploits opportunities. It is a generally accepted premise that stimulating entrepreneurship in the developing world can lead to economic growth, increase innovation, and alleviate poverty. Because of these potential benefits, a number of African nations have made efforts to create an entrepreneur-friendly business environment. Governments have put an emphasis on making it easier to do business, providing better access to financing, and building communication and transportation infrastructure. And this leads us to our question of the week, which asks, what are the key individual motivating traits needed to become a successful African entrepreneur? Well, let's get right to it and begin with a comment from Irongo Danielle from Rwanda, who writes, one key aspect is learning African preferences and tastes. For example, the Chinese are taking over African markets because they provide cheap products that the majority of Africans can afford. We like cheap products, except for the few Africans in the exclusive upper class. Well, another comment comes from Fred Twina Masiko Kakwavu, I hope I said the name right, from Uganda. He says, African entrepreneurs should not listen to the "This is Africa" proponents. They need to be aggressive and follow their ambitions. Other people will follow their lead when they achieve success. Well, very well said here from Fred. Shaka, of course, you can also, you and your guests, give your take on the first comment.
Thank you very much, Mariama. As a matter of fact, this gentleman, Fred Twina Masiko Kakwavu from Uganda, guess where he comes from?
Is he from, don't tell me, from the same area that you...
Indeed, he comes from Kabare, my neighborhood.
Wow, wow, wow.
Southwestern Uganda. And in fact,
amazing.
I used to know his father, actually. Very interesting.
So how did I do in the name pronunciation?
I think you did your best, obviously, as a descendant of Othman Don Fodio, who once ruled the great Fulani kingdom in West Africa. But when it came to Kakwavu, you were somewhat challenged.
Well, I'll help you. You'll help me with that, and then we can talk about your French lessons, maybe, something that you mentioned earlier with some of your guests. So
terrific.
We'll work on it.
Terrific. Fair exchange. Now, what about this? You heard what these two individuals are saying about doing business in Africa and what have you. How do you react to that?
Yes, I think they are quite correct, but I think there have to be favorable environment. People, yes. I guess people do their best in Africa, but sometimes they are hit by the environment around what they are doing.
Very interesting. What about you, Dr. Himbara? You've been working on this for quite some time. You've also actually been in the front line working for a government. What is the environment? How is the environment like? Does it provide an enabling opportunity for the private sector, especially for the indigenous Africans. Because frankly, I see people who come from Asia and what have you, they seem to do very well in most of Africa, but not the people who come from the continent.
I would say that you know, the picture across the continent is a mixed bag. It's not all at the same level. You have the South Africas that have relatively developed infrastructure in broad terms, financial sectors, a stable policy environment that won't change overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, on the other extreme, you have some countries whereby really, you know, they're still climbing, you know, the basic steps of providing the environment, the right policy mix
Mm-hmm.
that can enable and nurture entrepreneurs. So it's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag.
Yes.
It's a mixed bag.
Yes.
Well, Mariama, do you have any more feedback to share with the audience, please?
Oh, yes, indeed. We'll move on to a posting from Ugona Enwere-Yaku from Nigeria, who writes, African entrepreneurs must be idea-driven, creative, have financial literacy, and have a balanced business sense. They must also employ local people, utilize local resources, and learn to be an efficient human resource manager. In addition, they must be good at African politics. I wonder what that means, but I'm sure you'll have time to react on that. And finally, Bonomali Cheluzinga of Tanzania says, one must think in terms of using Africans and African resources, then develop the general skills needed to utilize what we have. So another great point from Bonmali here. But of course, the previous one touched on being able to be to do good African politics or to be good in politics. So I wonder, does politics have anything to do with being a good entrepreneur?
Very interesting, very interesting. Mr. Rujugiro Ayabatwa, I'm sure your politics must be excellent. Otherwise, how could you possibly function, own business in more than 10 countries across the continent?
I would say the first person there who put in the intervention, saying that you have to be good in politics. I will not say that. I will say you have to be a survivor.
A survivor?
A survivor.
Really?
Yes. You see, the problem, if you do politics in Africa, if you are good in politics in Africa, then that means to take you away from your duty, from your business. You have to know where and how to survive. And that is why sometimes you are hit hard, but you just wake up and try to find another way of doing things. But I don't believe that being a good politician can help in the business in Africa, because politics in Africa mean different from business.
Very interesting. Dr. Himbara, the last time I checked, you studied politics in Canada, despite your having been a peasant at some point, perhaps back in Africa, as somebody would say. I used to think, frankly, that if anything, politics was supposed to make things easier, that politics was supposed to make, for example, the impossible possible. What does it do in Africa, from the experience that you have had so far? Does it make things, in fact, the opposite, impossible?
Yeah, you know, this question of politics, you may recall, and economy, that was what I actually studied.
Correct.
How business and government work or don't work.
Correct.
So I would say that there are at least two types of politics. The good politics that encourage development, and bad politics that undermine development. Now, good politics that promote development is indeed knowing the role of the state. What do governments do? And what do business do? So that together they can interact. So that area where government and business meet, it can be either a springboard or a trap.
A trap.
And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, and generally, why, for example, Asian countries have taken off when they were at the same level as African countries back in the 60s. It simply means that the sort of politics we've had are those that trap, as opposed to the politics that spring.
Interesting.
Yes.
Thanks, Mariama, for bringing us this week's audience reaction.
Well, politics that traps as opposed to politics that makes things better. I guess we'll leave it there. And I want to thank all my viewers and listeners on the continent and in the diaspora who take the time to send us their responses. We really, really appreciate the time they take to do that. Please keep them coming. And before I go, just a reminder, we would like to hear from you, so drop us a line at africatv@voanews.com. Once again, our email address is africatv@voanews.com, or post your comment on our Facebook page. Just enter the keywords Straight Talk Africa. Be sure to visit us online at voaafrica.com, or you can join our YouTube channel. Just subscribe to VOA TV to Africa. Now, let's take a look at what's on tap for next week's program. On the next edition of Straight Talk Africa, we will take a look at Africa and the Millennium Challenge Corporation and examine the criteria and standards that a country has to meet in order to qualify for the program. That's next week, right here on Straight Talk Africa.
Well, we're back here, of course, on Straight Talk Africa, coming to you live from Washington. Let me go to the lifeline of the show, which are the telephone callers. Good evening, Patrick, from the great nation of Nigeria. You are most welcome to Straight Talk Africa.
Good evening, Mr. Shaka. Good evening, our guest. Your Excellency. Good evening, sir.
Hugely terrific, Patrick. What's your question?
Yeah, my question is, if you come like, my name is Patrick, I'm from Arochukwu. We have what we call skilled or skilled and semi-skilled entrepreneurs. And these people, we have them among the young men and just the youth. They are entrepreneur in nature, entrepreneur inclined. But empowerment is one of these major problems, this human capital, that is affecting the situation here. And my question to our guest is this, sir. What do you think my people here can do to do what? To empower this our youth? Because, you know, when you empower youth, there are other economical factors that affect business environment, politics, economic, democracy, and that's like what somebody raised about politics. Because when you are doing the business, you have to dance somewhere to the politics that is in your own place. Failure to do that, what do you get? You get high tax rate that affects their own business. So what do you think my people can do so that this issue of youth empowerment will be a vibrant story? Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Patrick. State of Nigeria. Good evening, Buba.
Good evening, sir.
How are you, sir?
Fine, sir. I'm terrific also.
Oh, terrific. In which case, I'm hugely terrific.
It's Buba Umariaza from Badarawa in Kaduna. Now, my own question is, the business of the day in Africa is leadership. Leadership is the business that is living in our societies now. Now, what, in your own role, what are you people doing over there to make our leadership more transparent so that private sectors can penetrate? Because absolutely, if the government doesn't support private sectors here, definitely there will be no market there, especially in America. What are you people doing to open up markets, especially agri markets in America and so on? Thank you very much. It has been Buba Umariaza from Badara in Kaduna.
Thank you so much, all the way from Nigeria. A reminder that you are tuned into Straight Talk Africa. Today's topic, we're talking to Pan-African industrialist and philanthropist, Rujugiro Ayabatwa, who shares his wisdom about the challenges and hopes for the continent. If you wish to participate in our discussion, please call us at 202-619-3111. The US country code is 1. We'll continue our discussion in a moment, so please don't go away.
Once again, here is a quick timeline about the life of Rujugiro Ayabatwa. In 2005, Ayabatwa moves back to Rwanda from South Africa. He also expands tobacco operations to Dubai. In 2006, he opens the Union Trade Center, the first mall in Kigali, Rwanda. In the same year, he also establishes the Rwanda Investment Group. In 2010, he begins a formal relationship with the Central University of Technology in South Africa. In 2012, he retires from his companies after 50 years, during which time his businesses helped create nearly 180,000 African jobs. That same year, he establishes a philanthropic foundation to help young African entrepreneurs and engineers.
Today's youth are not just the next generation of African leaders, they are today's leaders. And this is the time to invest in them, today, not tomorrow. So let's connect, let's engage with each other on issues that will transform our societies. Innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship, things that you're doing to move the continent forward, to make you the greatest generation that Africa has known. It's Upfront every Wednesday, 1730 UTC, right here on the Voice of America.
If you like today's show, please write and tell us what you think or give us some suggestions. Be sure to tell us what station you're tuned into. Our address, Straight Talk Africa, Voice of America, 330 Independence Avenue Southwest, Washington, D.C. 20237 USA. Or send us an email at africatv@voanews.com. Log on to our website at voaafrica.com. Or post your comments on Facebook. Keywords Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much, Esther Githu, and welcome back. If you have just joined us, our two distinguished guests are Rujugiro Ayabatwa, Pan-African businessman and philanthropist. Mr. Ayabatwa also served on Rwandan head of state Paul Kagame's Presidential Advisory Council in 2009, where he served along with 12 other members, including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Dr. David Himbara, expert analyst on development issues in Africa, working as a strategist for various institutions, including the African Development Bank, the University of the Witwatersrand Development Bank of Southern Africa, and for private sector firms and government departments on the continent. Among other things, he has also served as a private secretary and strategic advisor to Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Once again, I have to say, gentlemen, that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the two of you on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Yes.
You're most welcome. Before we go very far, let's talk about this great shopping mall that you built in Rwanda. You are the founder of Rwanda's largest shopping center, the Union Trade Center, or UTC.
Yes.
What is its current status today?
Today it had been in difficulty because toward the end of September, government commission, there is a commission which was created to manage those building or asset which had been left by those people who fled the country or died during genocide without leaving someone to manage them.
Yes.
And then that commission came with just typed the document saying from 1st October, please instruct your tenant to pay the rent, to to the account of a commission, and they give it to my management. And then the management sent me the message. I asked my other partner to hold a general meeting and decide what to do. So they hold the meeting, but and what come out, they find this was not illegal, and it was not at all. It was not at all an abandoned property or something which was falling apart.
I thought you were a Rwandese citizen from Nyanza.
Yes, I'm a Rwandese citizen, but there also something happened 2-3 years ago. I saw a document from government that they just canceled my passport.
Why? How can that happen to you?
I really don't know.
You used to be a very close man of President Paul Kagame. In fact, I am told reliably that your family and the president's family used to talk on first-name basis.
I agree. Maybe that is the reason, because sometimes a good friend can become a big enemy. If you, especially with a politician, if you talk different language and there are certain things you don't agree with them, then their reaction will be to treat you as an enemy.
Are you interested in his job?
Not at all. I am not interested. I am not interested in politics, and I'm not interested in that kind of job.
So why should this happen to you, really? Because unless someone, frankly, is suffering from a disease which they characterize as someone that happens to have a pathological fear of fair competition. Really?
It's you who say so. Me, I did not say.
What about this, Professor Himbara?
Yeah, Shaka, like we were saying earlier on, there are governments that facilitate business, and there are governments that undermine business. Those that undermine business, you see, there is, I would say there is sometimes confusion. What do governments do? And what do business do? Each one is designed to do something different, but they complement each other. So in this case, I would say that perhaps you have a bit of governmental confusion.
But how could that possibly happen when Rwanda is being touted for being one of the most successful countries, not only in Africa, but in the world, attracting, business, enterprise, and what have you? Is this one way? Is this a way of attracting or even maintaining investment?
You see, there is what's written on paper is one thing, but what happens in reality is different. So on paper, you can say, well, country A, you can register your business in half an hour. That is great. On paper, it can say that, well, you can withdraw or increase your investment as fast as possible. In other words, it is a functioning bureaucracy. That is what appears on paper. But that can hide the fact that where a government is not clear of its role, all that can be meaningless. Because in this case, they're using they're using a law that says that any business person that is outside Rwanda, his or her business, in that case, is abandoned. I have written somewhere that it's like UK saying that Bill Gates does not live in London or in Britain, and therefore he's abandoned his property, so they're subject to being grabbed. It's quite extremely absurd.
This is very interesting, especially because this is a man who I remember was considered to be one of the chief financiers of the Rwandese Patriotic Front when it was struggling against the dictatorship of then President Major General Habyarimana. That's the government, those are the group of people that you supported? These are the people that always talk about Singapore, the Singapore of Lee Kuan Yew, that Rwanda, in fact, is bound to be the next Singapore for Africa?
I think there is, I think there is something amiss. If by Singapore it means a kind of a developmental state that encourages investment, that is looking for innovations, you know, so that really it becomes the center of, you know, transformation. Then you can't be Singapore if you grab a business. Because if you grab a business, it's sending the reverse message.
Definitely.
Don't come here if you want your investment safely in good hands to reproduce and grow.
In fact, this is what Mr. Ayabatwa has characterized as, quote, actions such as this amount to economic suicide.
Yes, I would add that what happened to UTC, in my view, is something which is going to harm more Rwandan than myself, by that fact that it will send a wrong message overseas.
If you had an opportunity,
yes,
and the Rwandan President, Major General Paul Kagame, was watching this show, could you look in the camera and send a message to him?
Yes, I will send a message very clear that my intention, my investment in Rwanda was done with the intention of helping Rwandese. If the government have a need of that UTC building, then they should approach me and assure them that I will give it to them free of charge.
Very interesting.
But not do that behind the door thing.
I know you have suffered this before, and that was back in the 1980s in Burundi,
87.
where at one time on the streets you were called the king of salt.
Yes. Where did you get this? You are a very good investigator. You are a very good investigator. I repeat my message. Instead of damaging Rwandan economy by doing what they are doing, if they have a need of that building, a need of my house for a certain period, or even for longer period, as they justify that there is a need, they just contact me and I will give them it free of charge.
But what about the Rwandan government allegations that you support dissident groups, especially the one led by former General Kayumba Nyamwasa, the Rwandese National Congress?
That is totally wrong, because even when I was helping my fellow Rwandese to come back in 1994, I was doing it to help my people, but not with political intention.
I get that. On that note, thanks to our distinguished guests, Philbert Rujugiro Ayabatwa, Pan-African businessman and philanthropist, and Dr. David Himbara, expert analyst on development issues in Africa. Thanks to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. For